Hi, I'm Steven and I like to make cardboard costumes and props. Today I'm making the Prowler Mask from Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Let's get started. First up is the base of the mask, which consists of the face and the cheeks. The template for the face actually prints out on 2 pages, so I cut down the dotted line, lined up each side, and then taped them together to make the entire piece. It's super important to line everything up evenly, so take your time if you're following along. You do not want a lopsided mask. Once they were taped together, I taped the template onto a flimsy piece of poster board that I picked up from the dollar store. It was 50 cents. I used a knife to cut out the eyes and scissors to cut out the rest. See, it looks like a face already. I pushed that off to the side and then moved on to the cheeks. This was the same process except for the dotted gray line on the template. This line needed to be scored, which just means that I did not cut all the way through. I lined up my ruler, took my knife, and cut a nice, clean, shallow line down the dotted line, and then switched over to scissors to cut out the rest of the cheek. Because of that scored line, I was able to gently bend it inward, which gave it a nice, clean crease, nice and straight. I took the cheeks and lined them up on the backside of the face. If you're following along, you line up the corner of the eye and the bottom of the chin with the cheeks. Once they were lined up, I traced all along the edges, and this big open space is where all the glue needs to go. But first, I wanted to do a slimmer cheek to go between the face and the big cheeks, just to give the mask a little bit more visual interest. This is the template for the slimmer cheeks. I cut them out of cereal box cardboard and then put them on top of the bigger cheeks. They fit perfectly right above that scored line on the bigger cheeks. Even though all these pieces are glued together, I was a little worried that when I was bending them later on, they would pop out and kind of poke me in the face. So I just added some tape to the inside edges just to give a little bit extra support. Okay, and then you see the 2 V's on either side of the top of the face. I pushed these gaps together, so the edges of the gaps I pushed together, and then I taped them closed. This curves the mask inward, but you're going to get a better look at that later on in the build, so just hang tight. So yeah, onto the head strap. Similar to the rest of the project, I took the template, taped it onto poster board, and cut it out. However, it will probably need to be longer than the template piece just so it could fit your head. Let me say that again, make this piece longer. I extended the ends of mine by about 2.5 inches on each side. With that disclaimer out of the way, I took the head strap and slipped it behind each of the ears, which is just that half circle that's at the end of the cheeks. I used binder clips to hold it into place while I figured out exactly where I wanted to put the head strap, but as soon as I found a comfortable position, I immediately added some tape to the back of it so it wouldn't slip out of place. This side that has the tape is going to get glued down, but I first added Velcro to the other side. I bought Velcro from the dollar store and it comes with a sticky backing, so all I had to do was stick it behind the ear. I placed it on a diagonal, but do whatever works best for you and whatever is easiest for you to pop on and off. To be safe, I used some binder clips to hold it in place while the adhesive on the Velcro dried. As for the other side, I glued it directly to the underside of the ear. I also used some more binder clips on that side in order to hold it together while the glue dried. The chin is pretty simple, even though it looks a little strange. I made this weird looking shape, cut it out of cereal box cardboard, making sure that I scored along the dotted lines, and then taped the edges together on the inside. Once the edges are pushed together, it kind of looks like this janky looking box, but that's the chin. I slipped the chin right in the front of the mask, and it lines up perfectly with the scored lines on the cheeks. A little hot glue kept it in place, and it was at this moment that I kind of realized that it looks like Ant-Man. But I promise you, it will look like Prowler in a second. At this point of the build, I also decided to add some supports to the inside of the mask along the creases and at the top, just to prevent it from bending and looking too angular. I wanted to kind of smooth out those angles. I also added a rectangle along the edge of the top center of the mask because I was a little bit worried that I'd accidentally bend the mask and it would have a crease down the center. I don't know if that was completely necessary, but that's what I did, so I wanted to let you guys know. Okie dokie, let's move on to the eyes. Once again, I taped the template onto cereal box cardboard and cut them out. I used a knife for the inside of the eyes and scissors to cut out the rest. Working one at a time, I used binder clips to help me figure out the placement. This was a little tricky, but you see that little angled bend at the top of the eye? This angle lines up with the crease on the face of the mask. So that crease that you taped, the corner of this angle is going to line up with that bottom of that crease. But even with that, I still took my time and made sure that the binder clip held everything in place while I nudged it and wiggled it into the place that I wanted it to be. I added hot glue to the top of the eye before gluing down that little angled bit on the forehead. Last thing I did was glue down the tear duct section of the eye. I don't really know what else to call it, but it's the piece that goes right in front of your face. Because it's a weird angle, I was a little bit worried about it popping up, so I just held it into place until the glue completely dried. Yes, it was very hot, but it dries in, less than a minute, so it was okay. Oh, and you guys probably noticed that I didn't really add much glue between the eyes and the cheeks. To be honest, I didn't really worry about gluing the eye directly onto the cheeks because I want the eyes to flare out a little bit. But yeah, I repeated all that for the second eye and then moved on to the decorations. The first decorations I made were those breathing apparatuses on the cheeks. Each breathing apparatus is 5 layers. Starting with layer 1, I cut 4 copies of the shape out of cereal box cardboard, 2 for each side, so 2, 2. I took one of those shapes and hot glued a long thin strip of corrugated cardboard onto the edges of it before gluing the second shape on top. I basically just made a very thin box. I did the same thing for the other pieces, aka for the other side, and once all that glue dried, I made a slightly smaller box to sit on top of it. That's layer 2. The 2 layers look like a little step, and eventually it's going to be glued onto the mask on either side of the chin. Layer 3 was just a flat piece of cereal box cardboard. I used white glue to glue it to the center of the box. As for layer 4, this layer is an even smaller shape, except it's going to have some texture. To get a nice texture, I cut really, really thin strips of corrugated cardboard and glued them onto the shape with the corrugation side facing up and all exposed. I waited until the glue was dry and then snipped everything off that was hanging over the edges. Then I glued layer 4 onto the center of layer 3. The last layer is just a little frame that sits on top of the corrugation just to frame it out and make the edges look all nice and neat. And yeah, the breathing apparatuses are done. As for the other decorations, shapes cut out of the cereal boxes were added to the center of the chin, and a long thin strip was added to the top of the head strap. With those glued into place, the decorations were done and it was time to paint. The entire mask, other than the eyes, were painted black. I ended up doing 3 coats of black to make sure it was a nice, clean, solid coat. I did not want it to look splotchy. I wanted it to look as smooth as possible. However, it was kind of looking a little too black on black on black. So for the cheeks, I wanted to give it a little bit of life. So I took a tiny bit of metallic silver and mixed that in with the black paint and painted the cheeks. As for the eyes, once the black was completely dry, I painted them in purple and then a couple coats of neon pink until I got a shade that matched the Prowler glove that I made a couple months ago. It's mostly neon pink, but since the neon pink paint that I have isn't very opaque, some of the purple peeks through. I really like the way that it looks, but feel free to paint it any way that you want if you want it to be solid neon pink. Oh, and I also painted layer 3 on the breathing apparatuses, the same purple pink color, and gave it a little bit kind of more of a silvery tint to the black, just so that they would pop a little bit more. After all that paint was dry, it was time to finally add in the eyes. Yay! The eyes are just pieces of a screen that I painted white and then hot glued to the inside of the mask. You can use see-through fabric, perforated vinyl, mesh fabric, laundry hamper, whatever you have on hand, just make sure that it's white and you can see through it. And finally, once the eyes were in place, it was time to glue the breathing apparatuses on either side of the chin. I lined up the corners with the bottom corner of the eye and the scored line right near the chin, added some hot glue, and yeah, time for the glamour shots. Yo! So there you have it, the Prowler Mask Miles from Earth-42 wears in Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. I really hope you guys like it. It was pretty fun to build, and I tried to keep the template as simple as possible so anyone at any skill level could make it. That was really important to me. Hopefully I succeeded. As always, a link to the free template is listed in the description below. Anyway, feel free to hit the like button and subscribe for more cardboard costumes and props. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Bye-bye!